After my father won the lottery, he kicked me out of the house and said he didn't need me anymore. But he didn't know one thing about the ticket. My name is Tyler, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. 6 months ago, everything changed when both my parents lost their jobs during the economic downturn. Dad worked at the manufacturing plant for 15 years, and Mom had been a receptionist at the dental office downtown. When the layoffs hit, they both came home the same day with that hollow look in their eyes. I was 28, still living at home to save money, working as an assistant accountant at Morrison & Associates. Nothing glamorous, but it paid decent enough. When I saw them sitting at the kitchen table with those termination letters, I didn't hesitate. "Don't worry about anything," I told them. "I've got this covered." And I did. I took over the mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, car insurance, everything. My parents seemed genuinely grateful at first. Mom would make my favorite meals, and Dad would actually thank me during dinner conversations. "We're so lucky to have you, son," he'd say, patting my shoulder. "This is just temporary until we get back on our feet." I believed him completely. The three of us had always been close, especially after losing Grandma 2 years earlier. We were a team, and teams stick together during tough times. I felt proud carrying the financial burden, like I was finally the man of the house. My savings account was draining quickly, but seeing my parents stress-free made every sacrifice worth it. Those first few weeks felt almost normal. We'd watch television together in the evenings, share stories about our days, and maintain our usual family routines. I convinced myself this arrangement would strengthen our bond and that they'd remember my support forever. Looking back, I was incredibly naive about what money does to people, even family. 3 months into supporting my family, something incredible happened at work. Mr. Morrison called me into his office on a Tuesday morning, and I expected another routine assignment. Instead, he offered me a promotion to senior accounting analyst with a 40% salary increase. I was ecstatic. This meant I could finally breathe financially and maybe even start rebuilding my savings. The promotion came with additional responsibilities, but I welcomed the challenge. I couldn't wait to share the news with my parents during dinner. "Guess what happened today?" I announced, setting down groceries I'd picked up on the way home. "I got promoted to senior analyst. They're giving me a huge raise starting next month." The reaction wasn't what I expected. Mom looked up from her magazine with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that's nice, honey," she said flatly, immediately returning to her reading. Dad barely glanced up from the television. "This means things will be easier for all of us," I continued, hoping to spark some enthusiasm. "Maybe we can finally fix the leaky faucet upstairs, or—" "We heard you the first time," Dad interrupted, his tone sharp. "Congratulations." The word came out like an accusation rather than praise. The atmosphere grew thick with tension I couldn't understand. Where was the celebration? The gratitude? Instead, I felt like I'd announced something shameful. Mom started clattering dishes unnecessarily loud in the kitchen, while Dad turned up the television volume. That night marked a turning point. The warmth that had sustained us through the first difficult months began evaporating, replaced by cold stares and uncomfortable silences whenever I mentioned work or money. Over the following weeks, our house transformed into a cold, unwelcoming place. My parents developed routines that seemed designed to avoid me entirely. They'd stay in their bedroom until I left for work, emerging only after they heard my car pull out of the driveway. When I tried initiating conversations, I was met with one-word responses or complete silence. "How was your day?" would get a grunt. "Want to watch a movie together?" earned me a dismissive wave. The family dinners that once brought us together became exercises in awkward silence, with only the clinking of silverware breaking the tension. Dad spent entire days planted in front of the television, flipping channels mindlessly. Mom would disappear into her room for hours, claiming headaches or fatigue. When I knocked to check on her, she'd tell me through the door that she was fine and wanted to be alone. The worst part was mealtimes. We'd sit around the same table where we used to laugh and share stories, now eating in complete silence. I'd attempt small talk about the weather or local news, but my comments would hang in the air unanswered. They'd finish eating and leave without a word, leaving me alone with dirty dishes and mounting confusion. I started questioning everything. Was I doing something wrong? Had I somehow offended them without realizing it? The gratitude they'd shown just months earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by what felt like resentment. I was paying for everything: their food, their shelter, their comfort, yet I felt like an unwelcome stranger in my own home. Every evening, I'd lie in bed wondering what had changed and how I could fix whatever I'd broken. I've always been meticulous with money, keeping my cash organized in a small metal box in my dresser drawer. It started small. $20 missing here, 40 there. Initially, I blamed myself, thinking maybe I'd spent it and forgotten or miscounted, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every few days, money would vanish. First, it was my emergency fund, then my weekend spending money. I started keeping mental notes of exact amounts, double-checking my math obsessively. The disappearances were too consistent to be mistakes. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. Someone in this house was stealing from me. Since my parents were the only other people with access, the awful truth became unavoidable. The people I was sacrificing everything to support were robbing me blind. I decided to test my suspicions. On a Monday morning, I carefully counted out $360, arranging the bills in a specific order and making a note of the serial numbers on the 20s. I photographed everything with my phone before leaving for work, my hands shaking as I documented what I hoped wouldn't be necessary evidence. When I returned that evening, my worst fears were confirmed. $200 was missing, and the remaining bills had been hastily restacked. The theft was undeniable, but confronting the truth felt impossible. How do you accuse your own parents of stealing? How do you process that the people who raised you taught you right from wrong were systematically robbing their own son? The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss. I wasn't just losing money, I was losing faith in the people I loved most. That night, I moved my remaining cash to my bank account, but the damage to our relationship was already irreversible. I spent 3 days working up the courage to address the missing money. I chose my words carefully, planning to approach the topic gently during Sunday dinner. My stomach was in knots as I sat across from my parents, pushing food around my plate. I need to talk to you both about something, I began quietly. I've noticed money missing from my room lately. I'm not accusing anyone, but Dad exploded before I could finish. Are you serious right now? He shouted, slamming his fork down so hard it bounced off his plate. After everything we've done for you, you're going to accuse us of being thieves? Mom joined in immediately, her face flushed with indignation. Tyler, how could you even think such a thing? We raised you better than this. We're not criminals. The dramatics were overwhelming. Dad stood up, pacing around the kitchen while gesturing wildly. 28 years we've fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, and this is the thanks we get? You think we're stealing from you? I didn't say anyone was stealing, I protested weakly. I just noticed money missing and wanted to. This is unbelievable, Mom interrupted, dabbing her eyes with her napkin. Our own son doesn't trust us. After everything we've sacrificed for you. Their performance was so convincing that I found myself apologizing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. Maybe I miscounted or spent it and forgot. I'm really sorry for bringing it up. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I was right about the theft. Their explosive reaction felt like deflection, turning their guilt into my shame. I went to bed that night feeling like the villain in my own story, yet certain my money was still disappearing. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I discovered the truth purely by accident. I'd stopped at Corner Market for coffee before work when I spotted my father at the lottery counter. What I witnessed made my blood run cold. He wasn't buying just one ticket. He purchased an entire stack, scratch-offs, daily drawings, multi-state jackpots. The cashier knew him by name, greeting him like a regular customer. The usual, Frank? She asked cheerfully. Dad nodded, pulling out a thick roll of cash that I immediately recognized as my missing money. I watched in stunned silence as he methodically selected tickets, spending what appeared to be over $100 in a single transaction. This wasn't casual gambling. This was compulsive behavior. The missing money, the defensive reactions, the guilt and hostility, everything suddenly made perfect sense. My father had developed a gambling addiction, and I was unknowingly funding it. Every dollar I earned to keep our family afloat was being fed into lottery machines and scratch-off tickets. The man who raised me to value hard work and responsibility was stealing from his own son to chase impossible dreams. I left the store without buying coffee, sitting in my car for 10 minutes trying to process what I'd witnessed. The betrayal felt complete now. It wasn't just theft. It was systematic deception. How long had this been going on? How much of my money had disappeared into his addiction? The worst part was realizing I couldn't confront him again. Our last discussion had proven they'd deny everything and make me feel guilty for questioning them. I was trapped in a house with people who were robbing me blind, unable to speak the truth without becoming the villain. That day, I understood that my parents weren't temporarily down on their luck. They were actively sabotaging their own son's financial stability to feed Dad's destructive habit. I'll never forget the night I came home to find my parents in complete euphoria. The front door was barely closed behind me when I heard shouting and celebration from the living room. Mom and Dad were jumping around like teenagers, hugging each other and screaming with joy. We did it! We finally did it! Dad was yelling, holding what appeared to be a lottery ticket above his head like a trophy. We're rich, Tyler. We don't need your help anymore. Mom was crying, happy tears spinning around the room. I can't believe it actually happened. After all these years, we finally won. They were embracing, laughing, and carrying on like they'd just hit the biggest jackpot in history. For a moment, I felt genuinely happy for them. Maybe this was the answer to all our problems. Maybe Dad's gambling habit had finally paid off, and we could all move forward from this difficult chapter. But their celebration quickly took a darker turn. Dad's expression shifted from pure joy to something uglier as his eyes found mine. "You know what this means, don't you?" he said, his voice taking on a menacing tone. "We don't need your charity anymore. We don't need to pretend to be grateful for your little paychecks." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "Finally, we can tell you how we really feel about this whole arrangement. Do you have any idea how humiliating it's been, having to depend on our own son? Having to thank you for paying our bills like we're some kind of beggars?" The celebration had transformed into something cruel and vindictive. Their joy wasn't just about winning money, it was about freedom from gratitude, freedom from pretending to appreciate my sacrifices. I stood there watching my parents reveal their true feelings, realizing that every thank you over the past months had been a lie. Dad's face had transformed into something I'd never seen before. Cold, cruel, and completely without the love I'd known my entire life. He stood up straighter, pointing his finger directly at me. "Pack your things and get out," he commanded, his voice carrying absolute finality. "Tonight, we don't want your dirty money anymore, and we sure as hell don't want you in our house." I stood frozen, certain I'd misheard him. "Dad, what are you talking about? This is my home, too." "Not anymore, it isn't," he replied with a vicious smile. "We own this house and we're telling you to leave. You've been nothing but a burden anyway, acting like some kind of savior when really you were just making us feel pathetic." Without another word, he stormed upstairs to my bedroom. I heard drawers slamming open and clothes being thrown around. When I reached the top of the stairs, I found him literally hurling my belongings into the hallway. Shirts, pants, books, everything I owned scattered across the floor like garbage. "Stop it!" I shouted, but he ignored me completely, continuing his rampage through my personal possessions. Mom appeared at the bottom of the stairs, not to defend me or intervene, but to nod her approval. "You heard your father," she said coldly. "We don't need you anymore. Take your things and find somewhere else to live. Maybe now you'll understand what it's like to struggle without family support." The cruelty in her voice was devastating. This woman who had raised me, who had once told me I was her pride and joy, was now treating me like an unwanted intruder. In less than an hour, I'd gone from son and provider to homeless outsider, expelled by the very people I'd sacrificed everything to help. As I gathered my scattered belongings from the hallway floor, something caught my eye on the kitchen table below. The lottery ticket that had caused all this celebration was sitting there, abandoned in their rush to humiliate me. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked downstairs and picked up the ticket, examining it more closely. What I saw made me do a double take. The date on the ticket was from 3 weeks ago, but I recognized Dad's handwriting on the margins where he'd scribbled the winning numbers from last night's drawing. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. Dad had bought this ticket weeks ago, probably planning to play those specific numbers he'd written down. But in his gambling-addled state of mind, he'd forgotten to actually submit it for the drawing. When he saw his chosen numbers win last night, he'd assumed the ticket in his possession was the winner. The ticket was worthless. It was from the wrong drawing date entirely. The realization hit me like lightning. My father hadn't won anything. In his obsessive note-taking and ticket-buying routine, he'd confused this old ticket with a current entry. The numbers matched his handwritten notes, but the dates were completely wrong. I started laughing, not happy laughter, but the kind of hysterical laughter that comes when reality becomes too surreal to process normally. Here I was, being expelled from my home because my parents thought they'd won the lottery with a ticket that was never even entered in the right drawing. My laughter grew louder and more uncontrollable. Dad came running downstairs, probably thinking I'd lost my mind. "What's so funny?" he demanded angrily. Still laughing, I held up the ticket. "This," I managed between fits of laughter. "This worthless piece of paper you think made you millionaires." The color drained from his face as he snatched the ticket from my hands, examining it frantically. I watched him study the date, compare it to his notes, and slowly realize his mistake. The truth was undeniable, and their fantasy world crumbled instantly. The transformation was immediate and complete. Dad's arrogant confidence evaporated as he stared at the worthless ticket in his hands. Mom appeared beside him, looking between the ticket and my face with growing panic. "Wait, this can't be right," Dad stammered, his voice cracking. "I wrote down these numbers. They're the winning numbers from last night's drawing. From a ticket you bought 3 weeks ago," I said, my laughter finally subsiding. "You forgot to play it." "Dad, you just forgot." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stood there like deflated balloons, their entire fantasy collapsing in real time. The cruel confidence they'd displayed minutes earlier vanished completely, replaced by desperate panic. "Tyler, wait," Mom pleaded, reaching for my arm. "Let's talk about this rationally. We made a mistake, but we're family. You can't just leave." Dad joined in, his tone completely different now. "Son, we got carried away. You know how it is when you think you've won something big. We didn't mean what we said upstairs. Of course you belong here." But their words felt hollow after everything I'd witnessed. I continued packing my belongings into garbage bags, methodically collecting the clothes they'd thrown around like trash. "Please don't go," Mom continued, tears starting to form. "We need you. We've needed you this whole time. Without your income, we'll lose the house. We'll have nothing." The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 minutes ago, they were kicking me out with vicious cruelty, claiming they were rich and independent. Now they were begging me to stay, admitting their complete financial dependence. "I'm done," I said quietly, hoisting my bags over my shoulder. "I'm done being your safety net while you steal from me. I'm done being treated like garbage in my own home. Find your own way." Moving into my own apartment was like stepping into a completely different life. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely without walking on eggshells or wondering what mood would greet me at home. The silence in my one-bedroom place wasn't uncomfortable, it was peaceful. Within 2 weeks of living independently, my work performance improved dramatically. Without the constant stress and emotional drain of my toxic home environment, I found myself more focused and creative. My supervisor noticed the change immediately, commenting on my renewed energy and attention to detail. The phone calls from my parents started the day after I left and continued relentlessly. At first, I ignored them completely, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. When I finally answered, the desperation in their voices was unmistakable. "Tyler, please come home," Mom begged through the phone. "We can't make the mortgage payment this month. The utilities are being shut off next week. We made a terrible mistake." Dad got on the line, his voice broken and pleading. "Son, I know we messed up badly. I'll get help for the gambling problem. I promise. We'll pay back every penny we took from you. Just please come back." Their promises felt empty after months of lies and betrayal. "You had your chance to treat me with respect," I told them calmly. "You chose to steal from me, lie to me, and then throw me out like garbage when you thought you didn't need me anymore. That choice has consequences." 3 months later, I received another promotion at work, along with a substantial raise. My savings account was growing again, and I was even considering buying my own place. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt genuinely proud of my life. The freedom to succeed without supporting people who resented me was intoxicating. 6 months after leaving home, I learned about my parents' fate through a former neighbor who recognized me at the grocery store. The news wasn't surprising, but it still carried weight. They'd lost the house 3 months after I left, unable to make mortgage payments without my income. The foreclosure process moved quickly, and they were forced to move into a low-income apartment across town. Both had eventually found jobs, Dad working nights at a warehouse, Mom cleaning offices downtown. The work was hard and the pay minimal, barely enough to cover their basic expenses. "They ask about you sometimes," the neighbor told me hesitantly. "Your mother seems really broken up about everything that happened." I felt no satisfaction in their struggle, but I also felt no guilt. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. The difference was that my choices were based on self-respect and boundaries, while theirs were driven by greed and entitlement. My life had stabilized completely. I was living in a better apartment now, had been promoted again at work, and was actually dating someone for the first time in years. The constant stress and drama that had consumed my life for so long was gone, replaced by genuine peace and forward momentum. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been too harsh, cutting them off so completely. But then I'd remember the cruelty in their voices when they threw me out, the months of stealing my money to feed Dad's gambling addiction, and the complete lack of gratitude for everything I'd sacrificed. The hardest lesson I learned was that family isn't just about blood relations, it's about respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. My parents had taught me that some relationships, even with family, aren't worth preserving when they're built on manipulation and abuse. I chose my own dignity over their dysfunction, and I've never regretted that decision.